Welcome to Little Feline Press. Wherever you are celebrating this holiday season, we hope you are having a wonderful time. Over the last few months, we've been sharing some of Phil Kemp's poetry. For Christmas, though, we decided we should do something different. When Phil was growing up, it was a family custom around Christmas time to tell ghost stories. Following that tradition, this year Little Feline Press felt it would be fun to share a seasonal story that Phil wrote. So get yourself comfortable in an armchair by a roaring fire, settle down and relax while enjoying Phil Kemp reading A Christmas Encounter. A Christmas Encounter. There was a knock on the door. When the housekeeper, Dora, opened it, she stepped back in amazed surprise. The man who stood there was tall, about 6 feet or so. He was dressed in an old-fashioned thick green army greatcoat. The greatcoat was open to reveal a green uniform crossed with a sand-brown belt. She could see a bulge in the coat marking where the man's revolver holster stood. He was wearing a peaked cap. The man's eyes were blue, and he had a thin, straight moustache along his upper lip. Dora knew him at once. It could not really be Giles Farnaby, of course. It was true that the War Office telegram had said missing, but everyone knew that this really meant he was killed in action. But they said that whenever they could not identify the corpse. I am looking for Eustace Farnaby, the man said. Eustace is dead, Dora replied. Dead, said the man. How can that possibly be? When I left only 4 months ago, he was in the best of health. I had a letter from him that arrived only a week or so ago telling me that the estate was flourishing and that I was not to worry about it while I was at the front. Now Dora was frightened. Who are you, and what do you want? You know who I am, the man said in what he thought were pleasant tones. To Dora's ears they sounded like a nightmare. But I can't understand why you look so old, Dora. You were always the brightest and liveliest girl before I went away. I don't know who you are, Dora replied firmly. I've never seen you before, and you are trespassing. If you don't leave right away, I shall call the police. She went to close the door, but the man stuck his boot in the door and said, I don't know why you are acting this way, Dora. I want to see Eustace, and I shan't leave until you fetch him. Now Dora was angry. I don't know what your game is, but once again, Eustace has been dead for over 40 years. Well then, the man replied, who owns Farnaby Manor now? Eustace's grandson, Rupert, Dora replied. Well then, Dora, I want you to fetch this Rupert Farnaby and tell him that his great-uncle Giles has returned home safely from the war. That isn't possible, Dora replied. Why? Countered Giles. Rupert is throwing a party tonight. It's Christmas Eve, and he always throws a party for his London friends. Usually they have some very famous people. Musicians, film stars, celebrities. Tonight there are some very special entertainers. I'm not allowed to say who, mind, that are playing their music at the party. No one is allowed in who is not an invited guest. Well, if you won't see me then, Giles replied, I suppose I'll have to go and stay in the village and come back tomorrow. He withdrew his boot from the door, and a grateful Dora closed it firmly behind him. Part 2. Giles Farnaby, however, had no intention of leaving the manor house. Ever since losing his way in the fog of the trenches, he felt as though there was only one sure and certain place he could go, and that was Farnaby Manor. He did not quite know how it was that he came to stand in the centre of the village of Upney St Mary by the parish church, but it was then that he awoke and recognised his surroundings. The only way he could discover what had happened to him was to find his older brother, and that was why he had set off at once to the manor. If Dora would not allow him in the front door, there was only one other option. That was to go round to the tradesman's entrance at the back of the house. Here, since there was a party going on, he was sure the door would be unbolted. Between courses of dinner, the footmen and maids were, he knew, inclined to stand outside and smoke a quick cigarette before returning to work. As he left, Giles heard from inside the house the sound of what appeared to be music, but it was unlike any that he had ever heard before. When he got to the tradesman's entrance, he saw that there was a long black car with a closed roof standing in front of the door. Beside the car were 4 young men who looked identical. Each man was dressed in exactly the same clothes, a black suit with a black tie and a white shirt. What was more extraordinary was that each of them looked as though they had received a haircut from the same barber, for all of them had their hair cut in exactly the same way. It looked as though each one had a pudding bowl placed on his head, and the hair cut to an even length around it. All of them had the same fringe that flopped down to their eyes. Giles at first ignored them altogether, but when he walked between them to the door, one of the men said in a northern accent, "Are you one of the entertainers tonight, then?" "No, I'm not," Giles replied in an irritated tone. "It's okay, keep your shirt on," the man replied. "I just thought, seeing your costume and all, like." His voice trailed off. "My costume," Giles repeated. He was angry and upset. "Listen, young man, I've just returned from the front, which is where you should all be. Why haven't you joined our brave lads?" "What on earth are you talking about?" another of the young men replied, laughing. "I don't know what kind of cigarettes you're on, but you're on some serious trip, man." "I'm here to see my brother. I need to understand what's going on. A few hours ago I was with my regiment in a trench in northern France. A thick mist suddenly came down, and I thought I should find my way back to my quarters. I wandered around for a while, and then the mist cleared and I found myself in front of the parish church. So I decided to seek help for my family." "You're Rupert's brother?" a third man asked. He was, Giles thought, younger and more serious looking than the others. "Come off it, George," the fourth older man said. "You know he's stoned. He's having you on. George is a good lad, but he's easily taken in." "I don't know this Rupert," Giles admitted. "I was looking for my brother Eustace, but Dora, the maid, told me he's been dead for a long time. I only left in August, and I know it's Christmas Eve." "That you did get right," the older man said. "It is Christmas Eve, and we are here to entertain Rupert and his guests. Surely you've heard of us. We're the Beatles." Giles looked mystified and shook his head. Part 3. You don't look like Beatles," Giles replied, nonplussed. "We are not," the first young man replied. "But you must be the only person on the planet who's not heard of us. We're a musical group. We're called Beatles because a man came to us on a flaming pie and said, 'You will be called the Beatles.' I'm John, and this here," pointing to the identically dressed young man beside him, "is Paul, our bass player. Over there," John pointed to the young man standing slightly apart from the others, "is George, and that," he indicated the older man, "is Ringo, our drummer. Rupert is a friend of ours, and since it's Christmas, we agreed we'd come down and take a break from touring and recording by playing some songs for his guests." "So you're famous then?" asked Giles. "I think we're the most famous people in the world," John replied. "This year we've toured England, Europe, America and Australia. Everywhere we play we have thousands of young fans screaming for us." "How is it that I've never heard of you then?" "How is it that you're talking about a war, man?" John replied. "There's no war going on here. Hasn't been any war here, not since I was a little boy. And even then I don't remember too much of it." As John was talking, Paul burst out laughing. "What's so funny?" John asked. "You," replied Paul. "You've grown a moustache. You look like a walrus." "I am the walrus," said John. Then he added in a light tone, "But you, Paul, you could be the fool on the hill." George groaned and muttered, while my guitar gently weeps. Then Ringo said, "This is getting us nowhere, man. Here, have a yellow submarine." He pulled out a yellow tobacco tin from his pocket. Everyone, including Giles, took one of the pills. As the yellow submarine relaxed him, Giles began, "My last memory before I found myself back in England was that I was standing at the parapet of our trench, smoking a cigarette. Normally it would be too dangerous. A sniper could shoot me, but my adjutant had come to find me. 'Something strange is happening here, Lieutenant Farnaby. I think you'd better come and see.' I followed him out onto the parapet, and then from in front of me I could hear a tune that sounded familiar. It was that of 'O Come All Ye Faithful,' but the singing was in German. After a while, all around me, all down our line, I heard our men singing, 'Hark the herald angels sing.' Then the mist was coming down, but as it did I saw German soldiers coming towards us. The leading soldier was holding a white flag, and I could see that he was holding a pack of cigarettes in his other hand. Then, all around me, I realized that our men were climbing out of their trenches, pushing aside the barbed wire. Just before the mist came down, I saw our men embracing the German soldiers. I didn't know what to do, so I thought I should return to my quarters and send a messenger to our general for orders. The mist came down, and I got lost, and the next thing I remember was coming here. Am I dreaming?" "If you are, it's a beautiful dream," John said. Then suddenly it seemed as though he'd had some inspiration. He began singing, "Imagine there's no countries, it isn't hard to do, nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one." "Nice tune," said Paul. "I just don't see where this would fit on the next album." "Yeah, I suppose you're right," replied John disappointedly. Then he looked up. The melody remained, but Giles had vanished into the mist that now surrounded them. "Come on, lads," Ringo said. "I think we're on." The end. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the story and wish every one of you the merriest of Christmases and the happiest of New Years to come. Little Feline Press will return in the new year with more of Phil's writing. Please like and subscribe for more videos.